Hello, welcome. How are you doing? I'm doing marvellously. It's a bright, sunny November morning, and I'm here to talk to you about this wonderful Neutron patch that I shared recently on my page. So somebody asked me for the patch details of this. I thought I'd make a video and do a talk through, and so here I am. So this is quite a wacky FM patch with lots of delay and reverb. I've had this patched up for probably 2 or 3 months. I love the sound, and I'm kind of loth to let go of it until I got round to making this video and recording some examples. And as per my usual slow work rate, I'm finally here. So sorry for the delay where I've promised it. Just a few things. You're going to hear audio from my speakers rather than output from my DAW into something, just because I haven't really sat down and figured that side of things out yet. I will in time, so audio quality will improve. I'm not going to go through all the details of FM and sample and hold and things like that and different types of synthesis. It's kind of outside the scope of this video, but just to put it briefly, oscillator 2 is modulating the frequency of oscillator 1. So we'd call oscillator 1 the carrier, because that's carrying the signal you can hear, and oscillator 2 is the modulator, which is modulating oscillator 1. So that's the FM setup on it, and also sample and hold is controlling the pitch of oscillator 2, which is another form of FM, of course. So what I'll do, I've got reverb and delay on my DAW on this at the moment, and I'll remove those. I've got quite a nice setup here actually. I've got quite into doing this with my synths, is that I've got the reverb and delay on their own separate buses. So the synth channel only outputs to the delay, and then the delay sends to the reverb. So the reverb only catches the sound of the delayed part of it. So to me, it adds a little bit more clarity to the synth sound. So it brings it right up to the front and puts the ambient effects behind it. It gives it, I guess, what hi-fi sellers call soundstage, sort of depth of focus in the sound. It's a really nice way of layering sounds up, and it's quite good for synths with fast attacks, I guess percussive stuff, or bass lines, or arpeggiated or sequence stuff in the mids, where you've got quite a hard attack and a quick decay. It's adds nice depth. So there you go, a little talk into my mixing as well. And on with the sound. I'm going to go through the patch bay first, and then I'll go through all the controls from there and give you a few examples of how I tend to tweak it. So firstly, we have the sample and hold is controlling oscillator 2. So that's completely unattenuated control of the pitch of oscillator 2. And then oscillator 2 is going into attenuator 2. And then attenuator 2 is going into oscillator 1. So attenuator 2 controls how much FM there is between oscillator 2 and oscillator 1. And then I've got some modulation on the LFO rate. So the LFO is controlling the filter frequency, and what I've got is the noise output is going into attenuator 1, and then attenuator 1 is going into the LFO rate. So that is controlling randomly how fast the LFO goes. Additionally, to add some more control into this, the output of the LFO is going into the CV control for the attenuator. So what that means is, as the LFO voltage rises, it's on an upwards ramp mixed with a square wave. As the voltage rises up, it increases the amount of noise controlling the LFO frequency. It's kind of it sounds a bit complicated to get your head around, but it's quite simple. But what happens then is, as the LFO rises, it gets a bit bubbly on the sound. And you can control how much that happens with attenuator 1. So that's the patch bay. Looks more complicated than it is, as patch bays often tend to once you follow them through logically. So from there, going to the oscillators. So oscillator 1 is set to a sine wave on the 32-foot range and tuned roughly in the middle. Fine tuning isn't that important here in terms of pitch, because it's not a melodic sound. It's more of a modulated sound. So you don't need to be quite so precise. It's got oscillator sync on it, and that just adds in a few more harmonics, and it's tuned across to oscillator 1 in terms of the mix, because that's all I want to hear. I don't want to hear oscillator 2. Oscillator 2 is tuned to 8 foot, so much higher than oscillator 1, and then tuned around about an octave above the central pitch control there. On the mod wave, right at the top, and then I can use the pulse width control to change the tone of that as well, which adds more interest to the sound. The filter is on the bandpass setting. Frequency, it's something I adjust according to how I want to change the tone of the sound. Resonance quite high, probably about 60-65%. Modulation depth a bit above 40%, nearly 45% I guess. That's how much the LFO is changing the filter frequency. Envelope depth is 0. There are no envelopes controls on this. I just drone it with the VCA bias. Noise you can add into taste. The LFO, like I said, is tuned to the sawtooth and the square wave, so it's panned sort of exactly between those two, so it adds a little bit more movement into the wave. Rate's quite slow. Again, you get a nice slow rise, and then you get this kind of bubbly goings on with the noise attenuating it. Delay, I've got maximum time, quite high on repeats, roughly in the middle. There's quite a bit of distortion on this because it's a bucket brigade delay. They're quite noisy circuits. You can kind of tweak that a little bit because there's external delay going on as well, so you can maybe bring that down if you want a little bit less of that. I know some people really don't like that. I just see it as part of the sound of this synth. It's a big synth for sounding quite gritty and noisy. So the drive section, I've got the drive quite low. I don't want too much overdrive, though you can set it higher. In fact, as a gain stage, that's quite handy. The tone, again, like the filter frequency and also attenuator 2, I tend to tune depending on how I'm setting the sound up, so I'll cover that in a moment. Levels, you have to be a bit careful with this. It can chuck out some really powerful sounds, so you might get into distorting your preamps or your DAW, so obviously adjust that according to your own setup. Sample and hold is an important part of it, so I've got the rate quite low and the glide at full. And what that does is, as it changes the pitch of oscillator 2, it's sliding up and down to those pitches, so that adds more movement and harmonics to the sound, and makes a lot more for interesting noises. You can play with those both as well, just to get a few different characters out of it. Slew limit is 0, portamento time is 0, they're irrelevant to this patch. And then, like I've mentioned, the attenuators control how it sounds. So, just turning the sound up a little bit again. I've got this tune quite low at the moment, and when it's low it can almost sound like whale song or didgeridoo sometimes. It comes out with all sorts of interesting noises. So, I mean, the tone control on the overdrive is a bandpass filter anyway, so as you turn it up you get less bass, and as you turn it down you get less treble and more bass. It focuses the sound very much like the bandpass filter itself, so you would probably want to tune those fairly similarly to each other to make the most of that frequency range. So as I turn attenuator 2 up, you can hear more change on the pitch of it, and as you add more of that you add more high frequency harmonics, so I can then tune the filter and the tone up to catch some of that. You can kind of hear the filter doing its thing there as well. If I turn the noise up, you can very much hear, as it gets higher, it gets a bit chaotic. So if you turn that down to the middle, you just get a slow climb and then the occasional bit of madness. And then full FM on attenuator 2 now. So if I add the effects back in now, here's the delay. And then with the reverb. And you've got this very, very subaquatic kind of sound. I think I'll call it Voices of the Deep for the title of this, and I'll share a couple of examples onto my Soundcloud page so you can hear it with the full definition rather than just from my speakers. But there you go. I hope you found this helpful and entertaining. It's a fantastic sound. I love playing with it. It's great to just have bubbling away in the background. Please like and subscribe as usual. Sound examples, as I said, would be listed below, as well as links to my Facebook page, Soundcloud page. And please subscribe and follow me everywhere. Cheers.